Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name is Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay. I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk, where we are back at it after a couple of weeks break. Nice little vacation in there, getting back to writing, and also entering our slow period in the North Dakota political cycle. There's obviously a lot going on nationally. In North Dakota, not as much, but there are some interesting things. North Dakota Republican Party going to be holding their reorganization this weekend, where it's an open question about whether or not Governor Armstrong may be censured. There's 2 resolutions to censure our governor, one of which censuring him over property tax reform that was proposed by a governor who got almost 70% of the vote and was voted in favor of by just about all but 4 members of the state legislature. But that's a proposal. And that's actually that property tax proposal is germane to the discussion we're going to be having with our first guest. We have Arlette Preston and Zach Taylor on. They represent a group called Strong Towns Fargo, but really this debate is as relevant, I think, to the entire state. And specifically, Arlette got in touch with me because I had written a column in the context of the property tax reform, arguing that the 3% cap that the legislature has imposed is going to require some different sort of governing at the local level. And I think some reform. And one of them is we're going to have to address the question of sprawl. I think one, not the reason, but a reason why property taxes have become this consistent bone of contention in North Dakota politics is because we keep allowing very low density development on the edges of town. We keep building, schools and things on the edges of town, and that creates problems with lane miles. It creates a lot of issues. So here to talk with us about it is Arlette and Zach. Arlette, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit. I mean, you reached out to me after you read my column, but tell us a little bit about what your group, you and Zach and others are trying to promote.
So we're part of a national movement called Strong Towns, and the focus there is really on addressing the development patterns that have been happening since post-World War II, which is really that sprawl that you referred to, Rob. And the fact that the sprawl requires then a real strong car focus to the road design and everything else. I have been watching the Fargo financial picture worsen over the last. In fact, Strong Towns actually put together a spreadsheet to analyze the trends with financial picture of cities. And this is not only in Fargo, it's happening across the nation, where the financial sustainability has really taken a hit. And yeah, that's the main concern here, is that the development pattern really does not support the services that a city currently provides.
Yeah, Arla and Zach, thank you for working on this, because this is something that, I see in Bismarck as well. One of the things that really frustrates me about Bismarck is you have developers who are expanding the footprint. Those same developers then complain about property taxes going up. And then the people living in those communities are complaining they don't have the same services they used to have, because we add hundreds and hundreds of miles of roads. We don't add any more snowplows. We don't add any more public employees. And then people are frustrated when there's a blizzard and they can't get through and they don't connect the dots. So one of the things I see in Bismarck is developers have a huge amount of political power. And part of that is around the idea of North Dakotans want our 2 acres, right? We want our area. We have some land. Those same folks don't like to incentivize building smart in downtown and those kind of things. How do you get people to sort of understand this when they've been led to believe they can have their 2 acres, they can have the same services, and they don't have to pay high property taxes? How do we get them to understand there's a collision course and there's a connection between all of these things? Zach, I'm going to throw that very complicated question to you, because I think it is a frustration of mine that we don't seem to get it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I mean, in the US for so long, and in North Dakota as well, we've seen people have this kind of, fantasized American dream almost, where you do have your 2 acres of land, you do have a big house. In that same breath, you have people paying, exorbitant amounts of their paychecks on their vehicles, on their house payments, on their property taxes, which, probably won't last much longer. But these are financial burdens to a lot of people. And you're seeing that more and more. Within Fargo, the average person is spending around $10,000 on their vehicle, which is a bit below still the national average. And those costs are really only going to keep going up if we keep building this way, if we keep letting developers kind of take the reins on our cities and our city planning. How Strong Towns looks at it, and Strong Towns Fargo as well, is it's really about providing like housing options and a variety of housing. So in other parts of the world, there are single family zoning, but on top of that, they also build every kind of housing option between single family and huge apartment complexes. You can afford townhouses. So if someone doesn't want a 2-acre lot, you could have just a very small backyard as well, which would work for a lot of people.
Chad, if I could add to that a little bit. So I think the way you get people to understand is you start talking about the effects of what's currently happening. So showing them the dollar amount of the deficit that happens when a development doesn't pay for itself in the long run. Trying to get developers to the table. And in Fargo, we're starting to see that. We have an advantage, and that is the diversion. The diversion is going to push this much faster than anything else, because we'll run out of land to actually develop. But to get the developers to the table, you really have to start changing the land development code, the ability for them to build a certain way. So that's one thing, again, that thankfully the city of Fargo is going through. So yeah, I think, those are the two ways.
When I wrote my column about sprawl, as a right of center person, I got some blowback about me supposedly listening to a bunch of Marxist hippies who are just concerned. And I thought that your answer to Chad's question, Arlette, was really insightful, because the way you just talked about it, for me as a conservative, pro-market, pro-capitalism person, that has appealed to me. When you start talking about, we think people should walk to work more often, I start thinking, I have this vision in my head of like urban planners who want to treat our communities like they're gerbil cages. And we're going to put the exercise wheel over here, and we're going to have the water bottle over here. And I don't like that. I don't want that level of sort of ideology being driven into this, because Americans do want to live the way they want to live. To me, I think the problem is we're not pricing these things appropriately.
Right. They have to pay for it. They have to pay for it if that's the way they want to live.
I guess speak to that. Like, how do we make it so that the market reflects? If we want this, if people want to, their 2 acres of land and some distance between their neighbors, I think that's okay. It's just, it should be priced appropriately, and then we can let the market sort of control. Does that making sense? Because that's how I view this. To me, that seems like the crux. Zach's nodding his head. Is that the crux of the problem, Zach?
Yeah, I think so. Like, if you look at kind of how much things are priced, it's really kind of underpriced as to how much people are spending on living in this way. So if you're living on a 2-acre lot, you're not actually paying for a lot of that infrastructure, which is why you see property taxes rise year over year. If you look at vehicle usage, you're not paying, like, the federal gas tax hasn't risen in like so many years. So a lot of those taxes that, when that tax was first implemented, were meant to go to maintaining, infrastructure.
Yeah, a problem with that too, that we're burning less gas too with the advent of electric vehicles and
right. Yeah. So even less taxes coming in. But again, that tax hasn't been increased to reflect how much it actually costs to maintain infrastructure. So where the gas you buy to fill your car, that tax is still, it's unable to maintain the infrastructure.
Arlette, go ahead, Arlette, and then I have a follow-up.
I was just going to add a comment in regards to the property taxes having some flexibility and being able to have a higher rate of property tax on a lot that is larger. And we really don't have that option right now. So the property taxes for, say, for instance, a block that has 10 homes on it versus 20, the 20 homes bring in more revenue, 50% more revenue. So that should be spread a little bit differently on that block with 10 homes. So, and that's not possible to do at this point.
So, Arlette, would you support some sort of combination between like right now it's cost of the house. That's the way we operate property taxes. But would you support some sort of combination between price of the house plus land mass or something like that? Because I get a little concerned if we're just looking at land mass and somebody has a tiny little house or it's a beat up house or, depending on the neighborhood. Would you want to go just to the land mass or would you prefer some sort of combination or just the flexibility?
That's a really hard question to answer because I don't have enough information about it. But let me just say, having a tax that reflects the value of the land included would be important. We've got a lot of vacant lots that just sit there without any development, which does not add to the property tax revenue. And if the land value was calculated in, there'd be a lot more incentive for someone to develop that vacant lot. So that should be a stronger piece of that property value. Yes.
So, Arlette, I've got another really quick question for sorry, Rob. So I like to blame in my head the developers irritate me, right? They bother me, but often political subs do this to themselves. Like I think about hearing former Governor Burgum talking about putting Davies out way on the outskirts of town, and then we shouldn't be surprised that then that gets developed, right? And that expands the urban sprawl. So we have to get North Dakotans to understand what this means. We have to get developers, but then we also have to get elected officials to understand by making these decisions. How do you get elected officials, again, to understand that just building new on the outside of school, on the outside of town, is not always the right approach?
Again, I think it goes back to they need information, and that kind of analysis has not been done. Now, Strong Towns is really starting to move forward on that. And actually, we've done some analysis locally, and as soon as we can, we're going to share that with the city commissioners. They need to understand that full financial picture, and they don't at this point. I mean, I can tell you that they don't.
Yeah.
So that's the first step. I have argued long and hard, and we had a home way out in the south side of Fargo about 25 years ago when a elementary school was built out there. So that elementary school was a good mile away from development. The city put in the infrastructure. And one thing we have that's unique in North Dakota is special assessments. So the city funds all that infrastructure, and then they go and defer assessment payments for anybody that owns property between that school and the development that was currently existing. So not only are we allowing this to happen, but then we don't require the landowners to pay for the infrastructure. And who does it fall on? It falls on the rest of us.
I think I am a proponent of user fees, to the greatest extent possible. So tying the cost of something to the people receiving the benefit. Now, a lot of government benefits the entire tax base indirectly. So, it makes sense. But sometimes in specific instances, again, if you want to develop this way, if you want to live this way, then pay for it. Do you think, going back sort of a little bit, talking about the problem of creating some flexibility in the code, one of the things I really love about what the legislature has done is I feel like it has shifted this debate back to the local level, where we need to have these sorts of conversations about, ways in which we can make policy differently locally. But do you think some of the solutions to this is maybe, as you said, taxing the land? One of the things I like about the property tax is that it does put an impetus on the property owner to do something with the property, so that it has value and it generates revenue. I like that the tax creates that incentive. So I think maybe taxing land value makes a lot of sense, but also I'm wondering if it makes sense to create some more classifications. One of the things about this property tax reform is we're creating a primary residence classification, right? So we can determine, who's getting the credit, the $1,600 credit that the legislature passed. So I think that's a good thing. We could create more classifications. We could classify something as, low density residential or high density residential, and then make tax policy along those lines. Is that something you think would make sense?
That's exactly what I was talking about, and having flexibility and being
That's our last thing. Yes, idiot. That's what I've been saying the entire.
Yep. To have that flexibility would be important.
Zach, what is this all making sense, Zach? What's the primary obstacle to this? Is it just, I feel like it's two things. It's going to be developers who like the status quo because it's probably good for their bottom line. And then, I think there's a lot of North Dakotans who, again, they want to live this way and they want this sort of living to be achievable. And they're probably afraid that we're all plotting to price them out of the American dream, maybe, to use the metaphor that you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a very good question. If you look at, I kind of look at it from how we used to build cities here in the US. Everything used to be based on the price of land and basically how much was the land worth. So I usually there's a company called Urban 3, and they do these sort of 3D maps about property tax per acre within cities. And there's a similar one that Main Street, North Dakota did, and it's a map of Fargo, and I think they also did one for Minot and Bismarck as well. But you can see that our urban centers, our downtowns, are really our most profitable land for our cities, and pretty much all of the new development we built is very low property tax per acre. Even if you were to take West Acres Mall or any other mall, that amount of land used to create the mall, it does not compete with the mixed use, more denser cores of our city as far as property tax per acre.
So does it make sense to look at? I'm sorry, Chad, but does it make? Our mutual friend Tony Gehrig has a hobby horse with tax exemptions and abatements and things like that, and I frankly agree with him in a lot of ways. I feel like local governments have been promiscuous in handing these out at times, including in cases where the development was going to happen anyway, and we're just giving them a gift at that point. It feels like this needs to be a part of it as well. Not only are we allowing some of this low dense, fringe sprawl development to happen. In some ways, we're incentivizing it. Like, we're literally putting tax incentives on the table to help make it happen. That seems like low hanging fruit just to stop that.
Right. And that's exactly it. With downtown Fargo as well, they've brought back the Renaissance taxes. So it's an incentive to have people build downtown. And, there are those same incentives to have people sprawl outward in the city. I think one of the first things would be to get rid of those if we really want to kind of build more density, allow for more housing options, and allow people to live how they want to live.
Wait, no, we like the Renaissance. I mean, the Renaissance incentives are for denser development, as
I
opposed.
think,
right.
Rob, I think that's one of the problems. I mean, we've ended up, I know certainly in Bismarck, and I think in most areas where Renaissance zones and TIF districts have become very controversial. And there's a lot of political opposition from people who don't live in downtown and think we spend too much time on downtown and those kind of things. So you have people like Tony Gehrig or Ron Knutson here in Bismarck who basically says, hey, if it's a good economic development tool for downtown, wouldn't it be a good economic development tool for everywhere to get rid of property taxes? So how do you because the things that we've done to try to incentivize smart building in our downtowns have become very, very politically controversial. So how do you look at this differently where it's not just right? I mean, we have to bring political consensus around this thing and not just create a situation where people feel like there's winners and losers. So how do you get, again, I keep going back to the same thing. If people don't want to get it, they don't want to get it. I mean, so if TIF districts and Renaissance districts are too controversial, is there a different way we should look at incentivizing smart building that maybe removes ourselves from those politically controversial topics of the past? Are there other ways for us to incentivize this?
I can address that a little bit. So again, with the revisions in the land development code, some of the discussions that are happening there is using special assessments as an incentive. So if you build a development that increases the value per acre, the city will participate by funding the infrastructure. If, however, you choose to build a development that is lower value per acre, the developer has to pay for the infrastructure. So that's another kind of incentive. I think that people aren't going to fully understand this, and there's going to be people who believe that, I want a 2-acre lot. Everybody must want a 2-acre lot. That the market will help to convince people. And I think, higher density kind of projects will be more affordable. They're just, because they're higher density, they're going to be more affordable. So that's going to drive the market. And that's what's going to convince people more than anything, I think.
I think the success of your initiative, and I think kind of a goal all of us here are support, is really going to lay in moving this debate away from ideology and really I think culture clash. Because if we're talking about people who sort of prefer denser downtown development versus people who like living on a couple of acres out on the outskirts of town or in a smaller town, those are culturally two different types of people. I mean, they just are. And so I think if you set it up between conflict between those two groups of people, I don't think this goes anywhere.
Right.
I think where it's got to be focused on, this my 2 cents, where it's got to be focused on is the cost. Like, let's make sure that the cost of this development is being borne by the people who want it. Let's make sure the tax base is broad, and we try to keep taxes low. That should be appealing to everybody. Price these things appropriately. I think that's the key to this debate, Zach.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for the longest time, that's how we used to build cities in the US. They used to be more denser, walkable, and because there wasn't the the amount of money and resources to support the kind of growth we have today. And after World War II, we saw that kind of growth sprawl out. We started building sprawl, and now we're really starting to see the repercussions of building in that way. So yeah, I think from a financial aspect, like Arlette said, the market and people's finances and own bank accounts are really gonna be what drives this movement forward.
Arlette,
If I could,
yep.
if I could just add a comment there. I think this is all about having options for anybody and everybody.
Yep.
And right now, people are getting priced out of the housing market way too fast and way too much, way too often. So it's trying to open up the development pattern to allow for both and to be able to price things so that it reflects the kind of service that's delivered to each property and the expense of delivering that service to each property, which is different from property to property.
Well, it's
Arlette,
I'm sorry,
Rob, you go. Man, you can tell we've been off for a couple of weeks. Our flow is a little bit off today.
Oh, yeah. Well, one thing too is when I wrote my column, some of the feedback I got was that Fargo's already way too dense. Fargo's already nothing but apartments. So why do we want to subsidize or promote or in any way more of that? And I think that speaks to maybe the cultural divide or the ideological divide, that I was talking about. I think there's just people who look at that sort of development and say, well, I don't want that, therefore I don't want it to happen. But it doesn't account for the fact that people view this a lot of different ways. Some people like the idea of living in an apartment or a condo downtown in a dense area where they can walk around. And some people like the idea of living out in the country. It's just different people. And I think there's a way to your point, Arlette, there's a way that we can allow all this to happen and have it be fairly priced and accessible for the Americans that want it.
Agreed.
I'm going to shift gears just slightly. I find it amazing how often I'm agreeing with Tony Gehrig these days and some of his positions on things. Maybe I'm growing. Maybe I'm more thoughtful. But one of the things, Arlette, that you and Tony just came out with is the idea of changing to a district model for the city commission. I know Tony was the primary spokesperson. I love that idea. I think particularly for a city of Fargo's side, it leads to better representation. I don't care about ideology or whatever. I think it leads to better representation for the folks in Fargo. Would you, shifting gears just slightly to that, can you talk a little bit about why that's something you support? Why? I mean, it's a very obviously politically, ideologically diverse group that is pushing that. Can you just talk a little bit about why that's important?
Sure. So serving on the commission, and I think, Rob, you kind of referred to this a little bit. We heard so much about the focus on downtown and the rest of the community being ignored. And, I live downtown. I love downtown. So I come from that perspective, but I fully understand because I live down on the southwest side of town that there are issues and concerns for those neighborhoods down there that just didn't get to the table very often. So having representation where you have a representative that is that has gotten to know your neighborhood and that you've gotten to know, that is your advocate or your voice at the table is so terrifically important. And that's having the ward part of a council form. The commission form also, because of the structure of a commission, they get involved in the operations of the departments. A council form would remove that. It makes it much more efficient for the departments to operate. I had a department where the poor department head had to report to 5 different people to get decisions made. I mean, it was terrible, inefficient. So those are kind of the two sides of doing this.
Not long ago, Minot, actually, we had a city council set up, and then we went the other direction where we went to a city commission with everybody elected at large. And I supported it at the time, and now I sort of regret it. I think our problem with the city council was we had too many we had like 17 members of our city council. It's absurd in a town the size of Minot. So I think the reform we should have passed is we probably just should have combined some wards and had fewer people on the council instead of going to an at-large situation. But that's going to be interesting development in Fargo to watch. And again, I think that's a good proposal. I wrote positively about it not that long ago. Arlette, Zach, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and thank you for your work. I think this is really important work to get people to understand this. If we want to make Rob happy and keep taxes low, this is an important way to do it.
100%.
Hey, I'm not the only one on this that wants to keep.
That's true. So do I.
It's not. It's not. Also, we didn't mention the fact that Zachary shares a name with the 12th president of the United States.
That's right. Yeah, 100%.
I thought that's what we were talking about in the second half of the show for the last 30 minutes.
Voted to the presidency of Zachary Taylor. Zach, Arlette, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
Just finished up a great interview with Strong Towns Fargo, which is part of a national coalition. Arlette Preston, Zach Taylor. Really, and Chad, again, I think that's one of the features of this property tax reform that the legislature passed is that we're shifting. These are debates we've needed to have. And I think we've had them. They just haven't gotten a lot of traction. But I'm glad we're having them because, again, I think that's the effect of the 3% cap. It's going to force some of this. We're going to have to talk about this.
It may force some of it, but I also think this overall issue, I think builders and developers in the state have far too much power politically at the local level. I mean, I can't stop thinking about Bismarck, where we've developed all this land. We have not one additional snowplow. We don't have one additional employee. And then people complain when we have a blizzard. Well, there's a reason for that. We add hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of roads, but don't add any extra infrastructure. Those very developers are people who wanted to get rid of property taxes altogether. It drives me nuts.
Right. And then where do those costs go? They're just going to continue to spiral because we're not, again, if you want to control these things, I'm not really in favor of like some government planner sitting in an office deciding how our community should be designed. I am in favor of the market doing it. And again, just let the prices reflect the development. And I think that's the way to go. Anyway, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to move on. Our guest now is former Congressman Earl Pomeroy, who I invited on the show because I was reading an article recently in Roll Call about the similarities between 2009, 2010, when there was a Tea Party movement across the nation, which I was organizing Tea Party rallies in North Dakota at that time. And sort of what's going on now.
That's a lot, Rob.
yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, Earl was kind of in our crosshairs back then, but sort of what's happening now, where you're seeing a similar, protest movement shape up. Now, I should note that between the time when I booked Earl on the show and now, we have seen what's happening in Los Angeles, what's happening in Minneapolis, what's happening in some other communities, where you're seeing a concerted protest movement there. But it's interesting, some of your comments, in this article, Earl, you were saying that, essentially the party in power that laughs away or shrugs away overwhelming public response against the program will pay dues in the next election. Now, when you say that, you're talking about personal experience.
Well, I paid some dues. Private sector, here we come. I've seen this through different cycles, Rob. I was in for 18 years, and so there were some good times and bad times, and you watched them. And I saw a number of times where people be mad as hell out there, frankly, and the leadership would say to the nervous members, not to worry, they'll get over it, or as has been said with the more recent demonstrations, are the passionate town halls. All these are paid agitators. Well, you can take that view if you want to, but it's what I found is the concern the anxiety, the anger was very real. Quite frankly, I still believe it was based on misapprehension, a misunderstanding of what we were doing. But on the other hand, it was very real, and ultimately cost me my seat, and cost the Democrats actually in 2010 lost 63 seats, worst election since 1938. So you can slough these off if you want to, but there's going to be a election day reckoning, and I think these protests are real, and I think that there's some people going to lose their seats over it.
Earl, it's very interesting, something that you just, first of all, great to see you, as always. So you just said something very interesting. Thinking back to 2009 in 2010, you and I were on the same side. Rob was on the wrong side during that time. But you said that you're still under the impression that some of the voters didn't understand what was really going on with Obamacare and other things. That's the exact same thing that Julie Fedorchuk is saying right now. She's saying people don't understand the big, beautiful bill. People don't understand. There's no Medicaid cuts in this. Again, I mean, should they, even in a state like North Dakota, we're seeing there's dozens of protests happening on the 14th of June, hundreds and thousands of people coming out. I mean, in a state like North Dakota, you know how hard it is to get people off of their butts to do stuff. So can you elaborate a little bit more, like in 2009, 2010, when did it dawn on you that this was real? Was it election day or was it before that? I mean,
Or see, 1 year out, the insurance companies spent $3.5 million on negative advertising. Now, you don't encounter negative advertising usually outside the campaign window. So you raise some campaign funds and you've got a war chest ready for the campaign window. Well, here I was getting the bejeepers beat out of me 1 year out, 12 months out. I put $250,000 up against this onslaught from insurance companies, and it was like spitting in the wind, nothing. So people were angry. They had every reason to be angry if the facts were as the insurance companies were telling them. Of course, they weren't. The insurance companies were spending this money to feather their own nest. And we get that. That's how business is done these days. But they were very, very angry. Now, okay, what do we have going on now? You don't have insurance companies advertising against the Congresswoman, but what you do have is people with insurance, with the health care coverage they need. They value this enormously, and they're hearing that it might go away, that it might be reduced. After all, we've got numbers about this big, beautiful bill, $800 billion of cuts in healthcare, specifically in Medicaid. So of course people are going to lose their coverage. We have the present premium structure for the Affordable Care Act, people getting their coverage on the exchanges. That's going to change quite dramatically. We're going to have the largest premium increases as a result of this bill people have ever seen. And and it's estimated now about 5 million of them won't be able to handle it. They'll drop their coverage, but ACA covers 20 million nationally, and most everyone else is going to see a hellacious premium increase. Now, believe me, I was insurance commissioner. There weren't many people in Congress that had that background. And I know that people hate tax increases. The one thing they maybe hate even more is premium increases because it threatens their ability to keep health coverage for their families. Well, these premium increases are going to be daunting. Now, they've structured this so it hits outside the election. People won't pay these premium increases till the next year. But people aren't fools. And they're going to know what's coming at them. They're going to know that the coverage they have now is placed at risk because a bill that passed represents a great reversal in our country in terms of taking coverage away from families.
One of the interesting things about the 2009, 2010 movement was how strange a coalition it was. I mean, I think maybe from the outside looking in, you guys, it's just a bunch of right wingers, but it wasn't. I mean, I was at those rallies. I was speaking at those rallies, and it was bizarre where you would have, kind of a hardcore anarcho-capitalist libertarian on one side of the rally talking about fiat currency and the government, spending and the debt and all that stuff. And on the other side, you'd have a lady who was like, yeah, and these elites are going to take our Medicaid away. I mean, and they're showing up for the same rally. So I mean, it was a strange coalition. Now, I don't know that I see that yet in these protests in North Dakota. I mean, I think the Tea Party really got. I mean, the success of the Tea Party was, first of all, that it was a very broad coalition, and then it cracked up because it was such a broad coalition that it couldn't hang together. And I don't see that right now. I mean, a lot of the people I'm seeing organizing these rallies in North Dakota, I mean, they're falling pretty specifically in a category. When I'm looking at the people organizing, the people attending, I don't know that they've reached that critical mass yet. I think you make a good point. And I think your larger point about not listening, I think expands beyond this. When I look at these immigration debates right now, on one hand, I don't like what Donald Trump is doing. I think the man wants blood in the streets, unfortunately. I think he wants this conflict. But on the other hand, Democrats who want to talk about the rule of law in some of these communities, they've been calling themselves sanctuary communities and have been flouting federal immigration law for decades. And I think that's hard for a lot of Americans to take, where I think Democrats are guilty of not listening to Americans on immigration. And I think Republicans in some ways are guilty of not listening to Americans on some of these other things, like maybe, making sure that some of these social safety net programs don't go away. It kind of seems like a crisis of not listening on both sides, or maybe selectively listening.
Not listening on the one hand, but also now tying into a very stratified stream of information that reinforces prior belief, not providing information. And I think that's also a problem. I'm trying to bring focus on the fact that since we passed Medicare and Medicaid, this bill represents the biggest reversal in long-term efforts over the decades to get more families the health coverage they need. And guess what? I would call Trump maybe the great distractor. He's like a magician that has you looking over here while he pulls the rabbit out over here. I listened to the news this morning, anticipating our visit this morning. I didn't hear one word about people losing health care. We're about to have more than 15 million people lose their health coverage. And not a word today, because we're talking about Los Angeles riots, we're talking about the federalization of soldiers. And these are really important issues. I hate the thought. I've been to National Guard deployments. I couldn't be prouder of our soldiers, our patriots who've gone over to Iraq, Afghanistan, put their lives on the line. But boy, I hate to think about people from our own communities being put in a situation where they're forced to arrest their fellow countrymen in support of an ICE raid or something like that. I hate this. So I think we need to be measured. Policing is for cops. It's not for soldiers. And if you're going to move into the soldier realm, you damn well better have a very, very good reason for it. And I don't think that's been established yet. I think that's something we need to take a watch on. So these are important issues. But let's not forget about the fact we're about to take healthcare away from 15 million people, and a number, untold millions more, are going to have much higher premiums. We got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, and these are two big issues coming at us right now.
Earl, do you find some bit of irony looking back at 2009 and 2010, the controversy the heat you were taking and ultimately lost your seat was for providing health insurance for people, and now the heat that folks are taking in 2025 is ultimately for taking health insurance away from people? It seems like, my opinion on the courageousness of your vote in 2010 and how proud I was that Aaron was working for you at that time. There does seem to be some real interesting contrast between 2010 and 2025 in terms of what we're doing to people's health insurance.
That's a very interesting question. And let me just talk about 2010 first. See, I don't think people were mad at us because we're trying to get more people covered. They were told, if you get more people covered, your family is going to have less. And
sure.
So that the big lie was they're going to pass this Affordable Care Act. It's going to hurt you. It didn't hurt anybody. What it did was get these millions of families coverage that they needed. And so over time, how come people have kind of gotten used to and even grown to like the Affordable Care Act? Because it didn't hurt them, and they like the idea that more people get coverage as long as it doesn't hurt them. Okay, let's move to present time. Now there's going to be coverage stripped away from friends, stripped away from neighbors, maybe stripped away from them. And that is going to hurt. They are going to be mad as hell. I know that because I've dealt with this issue in a public context before. They'll be mad, I think, initially, but the bill's bite really takes place in the years to come. And I would hate to be a candidate running for reelection with a record that, yeah, I voted to take your coverage away. That is a losing proposition. Now, they've got to try and round up votes to pass this big, beautiful bill. They passed it by a single vote in the House. A single vote. Our Congresswoman made the difference. Well, but it's okay. It's first go around. We get another shot at this. But the second go around, when this means this becomes law. Well, Chad, I looked at a proposition of I wasn't there just to be there as long as I could. I was there to do something big. And I felt like expanding health coverage for families was big. It was worth it. It was worth getting thrown out of office for. I was sad people were mad at me, but they got over that when they realized that they'd been told a lie from the insurance companies. Okay, let's move to our Congresswoman or anyone else. They're looking at a proposition: is it worth losing your seat over taking coverage away from families? So you can pay a tax cut that disproportionately represents the wealthiest people in the country. So you give to the rich. You want to lose your seat over that? I wouldn't.
But I think we're missing some context here because not only the 2009 era Tea Parties, we're talking about this. It wasn't just a debate about should we cover or shouldn't we cover. We also spend a lot of time talking about debt and deficits. And that is also a context for this one.
Yeah.
And I think if Julie Fedorchuk was on this call, one of the things she would say is, Earl, how do we address our nation's debt and deficit problem without looking at programs like Medicaid, Medicare? They are enormous portions of the federal budget. So how do we get there without reforming these in some ways? And I say that fully. I am fully on board with the idea that we got to raise some taxes too. But we're not going to solve a budget deficit problem that is routinely measured in over $1 trillion just by raising taxes.
Rob, it'd be nice if this bill actually helped with the debt and didn't cause more of it.
I don't disagree with that. But we've been talking about this only in the context of should we cover or shouldn't we cover? And the thing is, I mean, I'm really concerned. What can we afford to cover? That's what I'm very concerned about.
I always love being on your show because you're such an interesting thinker. And 40 years ago, I was a brand spanking new insurance commissioner. 40 years ago. And I thought healthcare costs are killing us. We got to get after it. How can we deliver healthcare, quality care, more cost effectively? Guess what? 40 years have passed. We haven't made any progress that I can see on that question, which is why the bill keeps getting higher and higher. And we have to continue to work on that, and we need to do a better job than we have done. I think both parties are talking about some interesting things on pharmaceutical costs, for example, that reflect an effort in that area. But you mentioned something very important. There is the spending side of this bill. There's the revenue side of the bill, and they cut taxes. We're looking at this mountain of debt coming at us, and they cut taxes 3.6 on net, $3.6 trillion. And then they say we have to take away your health care because we can't afford it. Well, how about that tax cut? It doesn't have to be 3.6 trillion. Most of it goes to
when we interviewed Congresswoman Fedorchuk, she said it's no new tax cuts, it's a continuation of the existing policy.
Yeah. Well, what is that? Okay, so they can continue the existing policy on tax cuts. They can't continue the existing policy on making sure people can afford their health insurance premiums.
Yeah.
Because it's the same deal. We have expiring laws. They say, oh no, the revenue side doesn't really count. Only the part where we're helping people afford their premiums. We can't afford that anymore. And what I say is, if you're going to balance these, at least look at the tax cuts going to the wealthiest people. They're fine. We don't have to worry about them. We should worry more about families that can't afford health insurance, because it's not just about the families. What about the doctors and community hospitals when they're not getting paid? And you take, in North Dakota, it's estimated that there's going to be 17,000 people losing their coverage. We're going to lose rural hospitals over it. It is my sincere belief. You just can't take that much. People, when they don't have coverage, they still get care. They just can't pay for it. And that ultimately threatens the healthcare system that we all depend on, even those of us with perfectly good coverage.
I just, in respect, I just get frustrated when it seems like each side only wants to talk about one specific.
That's fair. That's
When it's a larger problem, and I'm not sparing any criticism for Republicans. The big beautiful bill adds to the debt and deficit problem. We're not fixing anything. We're saying, oh, we're justifying these cuts because we have a debt and deficit problem, and yet the overall bill adds to that problem. Well, what are we doing? And meanwhile, the president's throwing himself a military parade for his birthday that's going to cost over many millions of dollars. The deployments of active duty military to California has a cost. I mean, what are we doing? But that's what frustrates me is I am sympathetic to what you're saying, but I also care about the debt and the deficit. And I feel like an honest broker, and not saying that you aren't being an honest broker, but I feel like if we want to be honest about this, we have to talk about both of these things. I don't think we can afford to continue providing the level of federal services that we have been. Cuts got to happen. On the other hand, we also have to price government appropriately and raise taxes in some ways to pay for it. But everybody wants to live in a fantasy land where we can provide all these government services and it doesn't really matter and we just pay for it by. It frustrates me. I don't.
Me too, Bob. Me too. As a freshman, I got on the budget committee. It was 1993. We put a budget plan together that did raise revenues. Got in a heck of a lot of trouble for it. Actually, Newt Gingrich became speaker in no small part because of the way we built this bill.
Well, you've been a part of a couple of Republican resolutions.
I voted for it, passed by a single vote, and it had a very tough reelect, quite frankly. But here's what happened: when the Republicans had control, spending stopped. They wanted to cut taxes. We still had Clinton in the White House. So each party kind of checked the other. You're not going to savage revenues because you're going to get vetoed. You're not going to go crazy on spending because you don't have the House. And each party held each other in check. And guess what? By the end of the decade, we had balanced the budget. We hadn't eliminated the debt, but we were in a balanced budget. Now, we'll never see that again, I don't think, given how wildly out of balance it is now.
Do you think it's not, I mean, ideologically, if you look at the balance of power in Congress, it's not that out of whack. I think the problem is, maybe you agree with me or disagree with me. I have a feeling you're going to agree with me because you're a legislative branch guy. I think the problem is Congress is dysfunctional. It doesn't do anything. And so a lot of the budget decisions are just being made in the White House, where the presidents are kind of in this power vacuum, are just kind of doing whatever they want.
Yeah, I think that's right. I've been very disappointed with the absence of independent thinking you're seeing across the ranks of Congress, Republican and Democrat. And let me just rail on the Democrats for a little. My gosh, they were just lockstep with a very left Biden, and Biden wasn't left, but his people were. They pulled him over to the left, I just thank goodness for Joe Manchin, who helped to basically rein in some of the proposals that might have passed last time. Our deficit situation would be worse than it is. Okay, that was the Democrats. The Republicans, my heavens, they are really like a lockstep, in my opinion. It's not healthy. You got to have one thing you can say about our overweighted one-party legislature. These Republicans get in there and they fight like hell. You don't see that in Washington. They line up like good little soldiers. Yes, sir. No, sir. And whatever it is, Mr. Trump. And, I think that you need to have in the legislative branch a vigorous debate, different viewpoints represented. We're a big, diverse country. You can't tell me Nevada and New Hampshire send people to Washington, they all vote just alike. There's very big differences that need to be resolved. And if legislators give up that responsibility and say, I want to be the best soldier I can be for my leader, well, then you're really letting your voters down. And we're seeing a lot of that right now.
Earl, in fear of falling for the distractor in chief, there's an article up on KFYR TV today talking about Trump and FEMA, and he basically saying we need to phase out FEMA. It should be the state's responsibility, and if governors can't figure out how to deal with hurricanes or floods or whatever, they shouldn't be governor. What would North Dakota be like right now if we didn't have FEMA in Grand Forks and FEMA in Minot and FEMA during all these disasters?
During the years that I've been in, you're probably talking at us from Bismarck today, Chad.
Yep.
I remember the FEMA response in Bismarck. I remember the FEMA response in Minot, and actually more than once, Rob. And Grand Forks, of course, that's the poster child of how FEMA literally rebuilt the city. And now we have a fine, prosperous Grand Forks. It was on its back after that total inundation flood of 1997. We didn't have the capacity to handle this. I'll tell you that. I think that Governor Schaefer, my good partner during those years of Reconstruction, would say we couldn't have done this without FEMA. There's no way we could have done it without FEMA. It strikes me as very odd. You know what? I think an indication of how this isn't going to go well over the years is in Sarah Huckabee, who now governor of Arkansas?
Yep.
And she was a former president's press secretary, begging for federal money, and they said no. The fact is these disasters overrun a state's ability to handle it. And what's more, we're the United States of America, and we're Americans. We stand together on stuff. If the next state over, people get absolutely whacked, well, then they're our countrymen. We want to respond to that. It's only fair. And believe me, our time is coming because these disasters, they'll get you sooner or later.
Earl, one other quick thing on the big, beautiful bill. There's also substantial SNAP cuts in that bill, and the expectation is that the states will just pay for that. As somebody who pays very close attention to the North Dakota legislature knows we're basically paying nothing in income taxes and our property taxes are going way down. I'm really fearful that we're going to end up with a lot of hungry people because states aren't going to pick up the tab. Is that something you've been paying attention to? Are you concerned about that?
And should do. Let me go back on a gripe, and this is a Democrats thing. This is food stamps. They called it SNAP, but now it's got a new name, SNAP. I think that was woke put into language. So we talk about SNAP, no one knows what the hell they're talking about. This is food stamps. This is people getting the food they need to feed their kids, or elderly people are trying to make it on just tiny fixed incomes. You don't want to cut into nutrition to pay for tax cuts. What are you thinking? There's some basic elements of what we can do for one another as Americans. I like to say with this concept, it's not socialism, Rob. I mean, all of us protect each of us. And there's a day when, people need some help. And that day when it comes to food, that's an especially basic need. Shame on them for even thinking about cutting food stamps, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people get glib sometimes with social pejoratives like that, calling something Marxist or socialist or whatever. And I think, I'm probably as guilty of that as anybody. I think plenty of people are probably guilty of similar things. I don't think that social safety net programs that try to stop people from starving to death in the street is socialism. I think it's just something we can do as one of the most prosperous societies in the history of humanity. We can do these things, and they can be cost effective. And some of these things, it's really, I think one of the great, most confounding things about the Trump era is watching this supposedly populist movement arise, organize itself behind a born on third base billionaire real estate tycoon. And then also like even things like with the FEMA thing, there's a reason. I mean, maybe the state of New York or Texas or California has the resources to organize a disaster response on their own. North Dakota doesn't have the tax base for that sort of thing. Arkansas doesn't have the tax base for that sort of thing because we're relatively small, rural states. We're very spread out because our big industry is farming. So we have a lot of wide open spaces. And that means we don't have the tax base necessarily to respond to those sorts of things. It's appropriate for the federal government to have those resources available. Now, if you want to argue that FEMA could be reformed, it could be made more efficient, sure, I agree. Let's have that debate. The idea we're just not going to have FEMA. And it's weird because the people from rural America who would be hurt most by FEMA not existing are the people who are lining up for this administration. I don't.
What you got me on? Kristi Noem, now head of Homeland Security, former governor of South Dakota. Well, she knows disasters. We're up in this exposed Great Plains area, and we get hit with disasters. We've gotten them worse, but I remember when almost 200 people died in a flood in Rapid City. I mean, South Dakota's had their time in the barrel. We all have our time in the barrel. And for her to say, well, that can't happen anymore because I'm with the Trump train, I really dislike that. To me, she's kind of abandoning the education that she would have had as governor of South Dakota and going all in with a proposal that doesn't work that well, even in big states. You look at the Los Angeles almost burned down, not entirely, but they lost portions of Los Angeles that we never thought would burn. My opinion, that would if California alone is supposed to take care of that, going to hurt the schools, going to hurt other things. States don't have budgets that anticipate this kind of devastating hit. We didn't with Grand Forks, and other states don't when they get hit.
Yeah. Well, and my point is, again, I want to help California too. I want to help Texas too. Really, in some ways, if you're going to complain about coastal elites, they're the ones with the tax bases that if anybody has a shot at responding to those things, they do. Fargo doesn't. Grand Forks doesn't. Minot doesn't. Right. All right. Anyway, Earl, it's always a delight to talk with you. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I enjoy the invitation. You keep those invites coming. I'll be back.
Will do.
Thanks, Earl.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Just finished up with former Congressman Earl Pomeroy, and he's always a delight to talk to. I really appreciate it, even though he and I were on, and I guess you as well, were on opposite sides back circa 2000.
It is really interesting, though, the comparison of this time to that time, because even we've talked about it on this podcast before. I hadn't heard anybody talking about town halls since 2009, 2010, and now all we talk about it. It's also ironic that Julie Fedorchak has taken some heat for only doing teletown halls. Earl Pomeroy only did teletown halls back then. The two senators were doing in-person ones and getting the living crap beat out of them. So it's
and by the way, neither of them ran for re-election either. They both retired.
Right. And it's also funny. I was thinking about this over the last week. I was at a town hall that Kent Conrad had in Center, North Dakota, and Julie Liffrig's brother Mike and his whole family were there. And they spaced themselves out in a way that they get to ask all the questions. I can't remember the details, but I remember you could see them sort of strategizing on where to sit to make sure that they didn't all group together to ask questions.
At the time, it was actually really hard to track down the information about, because remember, this was kind of early days for
right.
And so it's hard to track down where they were going to be, and they weren't necessarily. As it became clear that they were kind of getting the tar beat out of them, my perception was they were making it kind of hard to find out about these events coming up. And so I worked really, really hard to find them and published a map that Chad got like 200,000 views of where they were going to be and everything else, because I thought it was important for people to show up. I have been critical of Julie Fedorchak for only holding teletown.
Not to be too nostalgic, but I also remember pulling up to a Byron Dorgan one in Castleton, North Dakota, and it was at the fire station there, and seeing all the people, like before I even got there, is already like outside the room, and I was like, this is not going to be good for Byron Dorgan.
And
it was not.
Yeah, it wasn't. I remember that one too. But I don't perceive that the current protests in North Dakota have reached that fevered pitch yet.
See, I disagree.
I don't think they have the numbers yet, and I don't perceive that their coalition is beginning to cross over into, because that's what happened with the Tea Party, where it was a very broad coalition there for a hot moment. Now, again, ultimately that led to its demise because it was hard to get some of those divergent groups to hang together. I don't perceive that as happening in North Dakota. I'm not saying it won't. I don't perceive it as happening yet.
So I think it is starting to happen. I will tell you, the first protest in Bismarck a couple months ago or whatever, there's like 3,000 people there. I mean, these are big numbers. The other thing that is bringing people out that maybe aren't just the lefty partisans is Medicaid. I mean, I see a lot of people with kids who have disabilities or those kind of things who are really, really scared. These aren't partisans. These are people who are angry because somebody's potentially hurting their kids. And we both know mama bears and papa bears get super upset when you start messing with their kids. And I think that's something that I am seeing a little bit more of.
Yeah, and I think it's, I'm not being dismissive of the protest.
Yep.
I think it's genuine. And whether I agree with their motivations or not, I think it's real. You know, I remember when Nancy Pelosi, we were all paid AstroTurf people. Nobody was paying me anything back then.
I've referenced these No King's Day protests or whatever that are happening on the 14th. I mean, I'm in a position where I'm the executive director of the state's largest union. I know nothing about these things, and there's like 15 of them planned. And like in hundreds and hundreds of people, there's one planned in Botno. You know, when you start seeing those kind of things, it feels more real.
That was the Tea Party, where they just started popping up all over the place. I mean, even beyond, I mean, I was active in organizing several of them, but there were certainly others, you know, doing the same thing. I don't think they're there yet, but I think it could get there.
And the other thing, it's not
some other, and I mean, it's a lot easier for them to organize now. I'll tell you, organizing back then,
right?
You know, the digital tools. We had some digital tools, but it wasn't like now.
But there also is the difference in 2009, 2010. Earl Pomeroy was a political target in this country, right? I mean, that was a swing district that conservatives could take over. I don't think you are going to see, like Earl referenced, the millions of dollars spent to get. We're not going to see that for Julie Fedorchak because it's not a swing district.
I think Earl was heading on his way out, whether those millions of dollars got spent or not.
I will tell you, as somebody who looked at polling back then, his approval rating during that time just dropped. When you have unresponded to negative media going on, and then throughout that campaign, he could never get above 45. Like for a year, he was at 45 consistently, and that's what he got at the end of the day.
He was also getting negative headlines. I mean, those Tea Party rallies were making headlines. I mean, it was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And it's some elements of that storm don't exist. North Dakota is not a swing district. It's not a situation where we have a Republican congresswoman or Republican senators elected in a state that's kind of sort of Democrat. North Dakota is not what it was in the 90s or early 2000s.
That's exactly right. It's different. So,
you know, it's a steeper hill for them to climb, and I don't perceive that they have the same momentum that we had back in 2009. But again, I'm not trying to be, this is just me trying to do the political.
I think the most interesting thing is in those sort of Biden Republican districts around the country, are we seeing this level of energy? Because this, again, you're right. This is a plus 30 Republican district for Fedorchak. The numbers aren't going to move that much.
She could move 15 points, and she's still going to win in the landslide.
Yeah, but those plus 5 Republican districts, that's where it matters. And I think anybody would say that in 2026 you're going to come out of that election with a Democratic House. I mean, that's just sort of the nature of the way these things flow. But it's interesting, and there's people upset.
There are. The other thing, we actually have a little bit of breaking news during the show. We got, and by the time people listen to this, I'm sure the news will be everywhere. But we did get the opinion from Attorney General Drew Wrigley on the Senate Bill 2014 line item veto, where Governor Armstrong's office essentially sent a mixed message to the legislature. He sent a veto message that accurately described what he was line item vetoing, but then they also sent a marked up version of the bill that had an entire section X'd out that shouldn't have been X'd out. Now, the legislative council released an opinion essentially saying it's a bad veto. We got to have a special session. Or, I mean, it's a good veto, and the controlling document is the marked up document. Therefore, we ought to have a legislative session. Wrigley, and I haven't had time to read the entire, but I'm reading his summary conclusion. I quote, he writes, "The governor's detailed written statement of objections is the legally operative document for purposes of ascertaining the language vetoed pursuant to North Dakota Constitution, Article 5, Section 9. So, I mean, the thing is who, I don't know. I mean, essentially, if Drew's opinion is what stands, then we don't need a special session, because what Kelly's line item veto, as he wrote it in his veto message, is what stands, and not, he doesn't end up vetoing what he didn't intend to veto. But, you know, the only thing I mean, if Armstrong leans on this and says, okay, I'm not going to call a special session, because this is the veto and this is the law, does the legislature challenge? I mean, to me, that's the question right now. Does the legislature challenge that in court?
Yeah, so Leg Counsel basically said Armstrong vetoed the $35 million that he accidentally did. Wrigley today said, nope, it was just the part that he meant to veto. Ultimately, the only person who can make a decision beyond the Attorney General is a court, right? And in order for Wrigley to be challenged, somebody has to make that decision to challenge it in court.
Well, and I don't even know. I mean, to me, I mean, the Attorney General's opinion, I mean, there's different opinions about how much weight that even holds.
Yeah, but ultimately, it's a court that would make this decision. In order for a court to make a decision, somebody has to challenge it. So if the legislature decides, hey, we're going to ignore the Attorney General, we're going to go forward with what our attorneys, the Leg Counsel, told us we should do, then somebody'd have to challenge that, right? Or vice versa. If they just...
Okay, so essentially, because what we're talking about is the executive branch.
Right.
The executive branch, let's get back to government civics 101. The executive branch executes the law. And so the money that's being appropriated here is going to essentially executive branch, or flowing through, at the very least, executive branch agencies. So what the governor can decide based on the Attorney General's veto is, we're going to execute the law as I intended to veto it, and as the clerical error in the marked up version of the bill says. Now, if the legislature has a problem with that, then I guess they can
send the money.
Well, no, because even there, I don't know that they have the authority to do that.
Yeah.
So I think their options are a court lawsuit to sue the governor, and we've certainly seen that multiple times under Burgum. But there's a different dynamic between this legislature and Kelly Armstrong than there was between that legislature and Doug Burgum, and those were also different issues. But I don't know. I mean, to me, it's an open question.
But they also have the option. They have days left.
They could call themselves,
bring themselves back and pass another law or something like that. So what I suspect will happen here, I'd be shocked if it's not the legislature lets this lie. They go with the Attorney General's opinion, and we never talk about this very, very embarrassing moment for the governor and his office ever again.
Yeah. I think the governor has enough goodwill. This governor has enough goodwill with the legislature where I think that's a very likely outcome. They could call
what he did veto, they don't care that much about, right? It was just one FTE for one nonprofit. Like, why would they spend millions of dollars to fight to bring that back?
Right. Well, especially because if they come back and they override that veto, I mean, they're going to cost the taxpayers almost as much money as what was vetoed. Well, I mean, well, maybe not quite that much.
But and the other thing, if they go to court, the taxpayers are paying for both the attorneys on both sides of that thing, right? So I hope they listen to Drew. I mean, and what a day when, we had the whole session of Drew and Kelly fighting about criminal justice reform, and now they're just one strong executive branch team.
Well, although the attorney, I mean, even and there is some tension between them. I don't think that they're like enemies now. No. Certainly, there's some tension on between them over criminal justice things, but I mean, also Wrigley's an executive branch guy,
right?
And that's probably the legislature. I mean, it's a little tough when you have an executive branch guy who's going to sort of decide this, whether or not the executive branch, made this error. I mean, clearly an error was made, but it's such a fine point. Like, you and I are really excited about this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know that the public has an appetite for a protracted legal battle going to the state Supreme Court or a renewed session. I think from a political perspective, I mean, there's not a lot to win here. Even if the legislature went to court and won, what did they win?
Yeah. Well, and again, when the Ledge Council came out with their opinion, Drew was not very pleased with the idea of Ledge Council offering an opinion when it was his job to offer an opinion. So I don't think, again, I think this goes away now. And
you saw his tweet about it with like the eyes and the alarm siren when he tweeted out the story about the Ledge Council's opinion.
I didn't see that, but I did see a quote from him somewhere where he's like, that's not their job.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, whether or not it's their job or not, that was certainly Ledge Counsel's opinion. I honestly, I think that Drew, by my reading of the law, I think that Drew has the right of
You're not an attorney, but you did stay at
I did stay. I can read. And to be honest with you, as complicated as we make this stuff, the text of the Constitution is not. We clearly know what the governor's intent was. His letter set it out, that it's not ambiguous. I think a stronger argument than Ledge Counsel's argument even was that the veto was invalid because he sent a mixed message. And then so the veto's invalid and the law
everything, yes.
It just stands. But I think the strongest one is this. The governor clearly communicated his intent. He made a clerical error. I remember back when Paul Sorum sued over when trying to dismiss Jack Dalrymple and Drew Wrigley's election victory. And they argue that the court should have thrown it all out, and also all the votes for the Democratic candidate, Democratic ticket in that race, because there was a clerical error made on some paperwork filed with the Secretary of State's office. And I think it was something like the attorney, the governor and the lieutenant governor candidates both signed the same form, and they should have done separate forms. It was something stupid like that, and the court tossed it because the court's like clearly we're not going to throw out an entire election over a clerical error. And I feel like the court would arrive at the same conclusion here. The governor wasn't trying to do anything shady. He clearly stated his intent. The idea that we're going to create all this additional rigmarole and cost for the taxpayers because somebody crossed out too much on the marked up bill is a little absurd. And also, I think the legislature even arguing that from a constitutional perspective, the governor can't legislate. So this idea that the controlling bill is the marked up one where he crosses out an entire section, I think is even problematic I don't even know why the legislature is making that argument. So I think Wrigley's got the right of this one. The question is going to be, does the legislature sue? I think we both think that's pretty unlikely.
Yeah, I think it's very unlikely.
All right. Well, having solved that, coming up, I was actually working on maybe booking Senator Kramer on the show. So that's going to be kind of interesting. But coming up next week, another person, we're going to have the treasurer on the 18th. We're going to have the treasurer Thomas Beadle on to talk about baby bonds, which I think is interesting. One of the things of the big, beautiful bill, or the big, ugly bill, depending on your perspective, is...
Well, I think the one thing we can all agree on, it's big. That's for sure. It's big.
Is Senator Cruz has in there, or I guess it originated in the House, but it's kind of Senator Cruz was been sort of the champion of this in Washington, D.C., of the federal government setting aside $1,000 for every baby born that would be allowed to accrue and then would be accessible to them in adulthood. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with that in Washington, D.C., but I think North Dakota has the resources and the ability. We have the Bank of North Dakota to make something like this happen in North Dakota. I did some math on it. I think it's affordable. I think
so. It's like a childhood Social Security,
except it's not like Social Security in that you're putting them in a specific account. So it's like when your child's born, and I think we put some criteria on it. Like maybe we say, the parents have to have been residents of the state for like a year or something.
What if they move away?
Well, the money's in the account. It'll follow them.
So if little John, if I have a kid, and I know we're going to talk to Beadle about this. So if I have a kid today, we live in North Dakota for 2 years, and then I move away. I don't pay any more taxes or whatever. Little Johnny still gets that money when he turns 18.
Right. Well, because it's just sitting in an account. We appropriate the money when the child's born, sits in an account at the Bank of North Dakota. Mom and dad want to put in some additional money along the way to help it. I mean, I did the math on this. At a 10% rate of return, which is pretty standard market index, every child, if you put that $1,000 in, just let it sit there for 18 years, every child could have $6,000.
Rob Port, big government programs. That's what he loved.
If a parent puts even $25 in a month, right, which is the cost of a streaming service or two, you're talking about that child entering adulthood with $21,000 in the bank. That's remarkable. We have the Bank of North Dakota, which could administer this. Wouldn't be that hard.
Let's pay for student lunches instead.
But the cost of this would be about, it's actually significantly cheaper than student lunches. The cost of this, looking at our average live birth rate in North Dakota over the last decade, the cost of this would be about $19 million a biennium. And maybe it's more. I'm sure there's some administrative costs or something along the way, but that's affordable, Chad.
Rob, I'm going to have to be convinced this is the right way to use $19 million.
Okay. Wow. I don't know. I expected you to be more enthusiastic about this.
No, not I mean, here's the deal. I just went through a legislative session where I watched these people nickel and dime a lot of programs that I really care about, and they underfunded education. They did all these different things. To the idea of giving everybody $1,000 who's born, that might be a bridge.
I don't expect it. I don't know how popular it would be with the legislature. I will say, because I wrote a column about this.
Oh, I read it.
And the treasurer got in touch with me. He told me that 15 other states are already doing this.
One of the problems I have with it,
versions of this, I should say.
The fact that it's called the Trump accounts or whatever he's calling it,
well, that was that was a pretty. I mean, that's Senator Ted Cruz wanting Trump to get behind it by appealing to his ego. And the thing is, if it's a good idea, I had people on Facebook when I wrote about this, and they're like, "Oh, Port finally admits Trump's right about something." I'll admit when he's right about things. Good policy is good policy. Stop clocks are right twice a day. He's still a terrible president and a terrible leader for his country, but this isn't a bad idea. And whatever they do in Washington, I think this is something North Dakota could do. But we'll talk about that.
I look forward to that conversation. Maybe we'll fight a little bit about it.
We don't need to have that whole conversation today. Senator Kramer, maybe on Friday. I don't know yet. I haven't heard back from them, but we'll have something exciting. Thank you so much for listening. It's good to be back, too. I really miss doing this.
And again, apologies for our first 30 minutes when we weren't exactly in a good rhythm. I felt like with Earl, we got in a little better place. We'll be better on Friday.
Definitely. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. Yes, idiot. That's what I've been saying the entire.
Yep.